He's saying, I'm not just going to wait for you to play d4. I am going to prepare d5 myself. And we start this kind of cat and mouse game. It is time for your Grand Prix final rapid recap game 2. And this was definitely an interesting game. There were a couple of moments of note. Ketty, I'll be completely honest. I was a little bit disappointed to see an Italian. I was hoping for something a little bit more unbalanced, but you can understand Levon's choice. I mean, he goes for what he's comfortable with. He goes for something reputable and solid, and ultimately no big surprises in the opening as they follow a very topical line with A4, which most people are playing nowadays.
And they have even played this line, particularly in their other game in 2018. So they were quite familiar of these plans. They played all this move rather fast. And there was just one moment when both players were fighting for the center. So maybe we can get in that point.
Yeah, knight A3, a relatively modern move. You know, traditionally white puts the knight on D2, but recently people have started to do this knight A3, knight C2. And the idea is to play bishop E3 and to recapture with the knight. And this knight on E3 is well placed. You know, it guards D5. It can jump into F5. Hikaru doing everything pretty normally. And things start to percolate around here. Levon plays A5, fixing the queenside pawn structure. Hikaru responds with C6. And this really signals his ambitions, right? He's saying, I'm not just going to wait for you to play D4. I am going to prepare D5 myself. And we start this kind of cat and mouse game. Levon drops the bishop back, and Ketty, you pointed out that D5 is possibly a little bit premature because after taking, Levon can go D4, E4, and perhaps even drop the knight back to D2, followed by the move F3, cutting into black's pawn chain. And this isn't always as good as it looks. So Hikaru, after a pretty long think, decides to refrain from playing D5, and he never does end up playing D5.
No, he didn't play D5. Instead, he goes with H6, a little bit waiting move here. After bishop C2, now clearly white is the one who wants to fight for the center with D4. And in those lines, E4 pawn won't be hanging anymore. Black plays rook gate to keep the pressure on this file. And now at this stage, black went with a very interesting move, Queen C7.
Yeah, the engine like D5 in this position, but Hikaru going for a very interesting approach. Levon pulls the trigger. Here's D4. After E takes D4, there was a possibility of taking with the knight, but Levon taking more straightforwardly with the queen. And I really liked the way Hikaru handled this creatively, but in a very positionally sound manner. C5 looks bad. Looks like it weakens the D5 square, the D6 pawn. And we were expecting him to follow up with bishop D7, bishop C6, but instead he chooses the move bishop G4, Ketty, forcing a trade and essentially going for a bad bishop versus good knight situation. Of course, this bishop is not necessarily bad. And Levon responding himself with a very nice move, preparing to maneuver this knight, hopefully at some point all the way until D5. And Hikaru not wasting any time and counter-striking immediately.
Yes, here after Queen D1, we were thinking how to avoid this knight maneuvering. Then there was a suggestion to play knight E5 and to keep the tension on the board, to bring another knight in the on F4 to push C4 and occupy D3 square. So we were really deep in these lines, and out of a sudden we saw the move B5 on the board, which allows white to take the pawn with en passant, but now the queen comes on the B file, and this is a very nice file for black to play.
Yeah, the engine actually thought that white is a little bit better after rook A2, defending the pawn, but Levon quite quickly embarked on knight D2. Now, it's unclear to me whether maybe he underestimated the possibility of queen takes B2, but he must have been aware of it. So Hikaru, after a pretty long think, very good call. He takes on B2, the only way to preserve the balance. He's definitely worse if he moves the knight. And the point here is that you can't really take the knight because of queen takes bishop and white emerges a pawn down. So there were several possibilities for white, but all of them ultimately led to a draw. One of them was bishop B3. And one of the nicer lines that we saw was queen takes C3. This looks like it loses a piece, right, Ketty? But in this position, a beautiful resource to draw the game.
Yeah, and this is C4. black attacks the bishop, forces white to take this pawn. White obviously takes this pawn, otherwise the queen on g6 is hanging. And now d5. And you know what? We can get into the rook endgame where it seems quite calm position and not really hard to achieve a draw.
Yeah, this is a dead draw, and this was just one of many possible lines. But the thing is, black is not even obliged to take on c3, and there were alternatives there as well. And Levon decides to force a draw. Knight c4, queen takes c3. Now, the knight is hanging. He goes to b6. So Levon ultimately does manage to get his knight to d5. I guess in that way, his strategy ended up being successful. But the problem is that he's 2 pawns down, and he's still struggling with the placement of this bishop on c2 and a repetition of moves. Rook b1, queen a2, rook a1. Neither side is able to decline the repetition. Black must keep himself anchored to the bishop, and white must keep chasing the queen in order to try to get it away from the bishop. And so the game ends peacefully in 29 moves. Keddy, a combative game, an interesting game, well played by both sides. Really no major mistakes.
No major mistakes, and even this creates a very interesting situation for chess fans and the chess viewers, because after this draw, we are going to see playoffs in the rapid time control.
Indeed. And this was your FIDE Grand Prix final rapid recap for game 2. It's indeed 1-1 in Nakamura Aronian. Once again, not a surprise to anybody as it boils down to tie breaks tomorrow, which of course will be at the same exact start time, 6 a.m. Pacific. I can't wait. The tie breaks are going to be so interesting because at some point, one of these players is going to go wrong. One of them is going to take a bigger risk. And the question is, who is it going to be? Now, I think that Hikaru will be very encouraged at the fact that we have a rapid playoff. But let's not forget that Levon is one of the strongest rapid players himself. You know, Levon is an incredibly strong rapid player. So this is not going to be easy for either of them. So we are getting word that Hikaru is going to be white in the first rapid game tomorrow. But again, very important. They are playing 2 rapid games. Both are going to have both colors. Obviously, if that's drawn, then 2 more blitz games, 3+2. And if that ends up in 1-1, we will have an Armageddon, which is not out of the realm of possibility, Keddy. As we discussed, given how evenly matched these players are, I wouldn't really be all that surprised if we actually went to Armageddon.
I will not be surprised at all, because what we have seen so far, it's equal strength from both sides. And they have played a lot of games, 100, if not more games. And in many cases, as I can see, 67 times in rapid game that ended in a draw. So very likely we might see tomorrow's playoff go into the Armageddon.